Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
All right. It seems like an auspicious day today. I don't know why. It just feels that way to me. Happy Sunday, happy St. Patty's Day, where it seems like one day a year the entire world becomes Irish and then spends the next 2 weeks trying to recover from it. And of course, happy vernal equinox. So it seems like there's so much to be grateful for, so much to be happy and joyous about. And at the same time, we can also expand our heart and hold within it the suffering of those in the Ukraine, suffering of those in Gaza and Israel, the suffering of those right here in our own country who recently experienced some pretty devastating tornadoes and a loss of their communities and their homes. So we can hold all of that in our hearts, expanding our hearts, not collapsing it down into any one particular thing. And so I mentioned the vernal equinox. On Tuesday at exactly 10:09 p.m. will be that point, that moment when day and night are exactly equal. And so that also means that on Wednesday is the first day of spring. So here we are on the cusp, right? We've got 1 foot in winter, 1 foot in spring. We've got 1 foot in sandals and 1 foot in mucklucks. One tree is blooming while another tree is still asleep. And what a wonderful metaphor for our practice, really. You see, there are moments when we are blooming, when we glimpse oneness, when we feel resonance and connection. And then there are moments when we are angry, righteous, or judgmental. Our whole life, it seems, is really kind of spent on the cusp, isn't it? When you understand and realize impermanence, and how everything is a process, not a thing. Everything is in the process of becoming something else. So in a way, we're kind of always on the cusp, part in the world of form and part in the world of formless. Could it be that we are the cusp? I don't actually have anything there to rub, but so the word cusp, which I have actually used more in the last 15 minutes than I have in the last 15 years, comes from the Latin word cuspis, or point. So the talk today invites us into the center of the Venn diagram of awareness, into that point or moment that provides clear contrast between what is known, what is unknown, between conditioned patterns of speech and behavior and the unconditioned. Now, you've heard me speak before about the inherent duality of life in this realm. For example, we only know hot because of cold. We only know day because of night, etc. But there's an opportunity here to cultivate a deeper awareness. When we are on the cusp, when we are in transition, if we bring awareness to the cusp itself, it's an awakening to this transitional period that I am in, especially when they are more apparent. For example, switching jobs, switching relationships, those things that are really, really intense for us. Not to mention the little tiny transitions, right? You know, from the Dharma Talk into the heart practice, or from this breath into the next breath. And so when we are in this transition, when we are in this cusp, when we can bring awareness to the contrast, and I'm very intentional about the choice of words here. When we bring our awareness to the contrast itself, then right there is an opportunity to be in a place that truly dissolves judgmentalism. And for us here in the West, judgmentalism is a major issue for most of us to transcend. We don't necessarily have to get rid of it. The key is to be aware of it. I mean, everything about our culture is competitive. I mean, people can't sing without being voted off the island, or, the X Factor or The Voice, or everything is a judgment. It's like, it's really painful in some ways. And so when we can bring our awareness to this center point, to be able to dissolve judgmentalism and simply be aware that we are, in this transitional moment, instead of being caught up in all of our thoughts about the two different circumstances that we're standing between. All the past, the future, the judgmentalism about good, bad, right, wrong, villain, victim. We get caught up in these egoic mind states and are missing the incredible gift that being in transition, that being in the cusp offers us. Ram Dass used to talk about doorways, about savoring the moment that we go from one room to the next. Jack Kornfield talks about in the same way, talks about noticing what you notice. Think of the awareness in that statement. Notice what you notice. As you move, for example, from one room to the next, was this one better than that one? Is there hope and anticipation that this room will be better than that room? Past, future, good, bad? And we miss the transition itself, the threshold, the doorway itself. Look at what we learn when we realize during meditation that we have become lost in thought, and then we come back to our breath. Look at what we learn. Is your reaction one of celebration, or is it one of consternation? When you're in meditation, and you're just kind of blissing out, and then all of a sudden, you realize that you're about 15 or 20 thoughts down on a thought train, thinking about something that you should have done yesterday or you need to do tomorrow. And in that moment of awakening, are you like, oh, darn it, see, I'm not a good meditator? Or in that moment that you come back to your breath, is that a celebration of awakening? I woke up from the dream of thought. I woke up from the constant parade of phenomena, memories, decision-makings, judgments, prejudices that the egoic mind places in front of us. So, in this way, in the same way that we focus only on the things in the room instead of the space in the room, we also focus on the thoughts and we ignore the spaces between them. What would musical notes be if not for the silence between them? In our spiritual journey, we must cultivate an aspect of a pragmatism. We must be pragmatic about it. How can the Dharma and paths of practice that we encounter be useful to our own understanding? I love how pragmatic the Buddha was. And I think I even mentioned this story a couple weeks ago, but it's still fresh and I still like it, so I'm going to say it again. One time the Buddha was meditating in Sangha and he sneezed, and one of the attendants next to him wished him a long and happy life. And he turns to her and he says, does wishing someone a long and happy life make it so? And she goes, no. And he goes, okay, just checking. Useful, right? Is it useful? Sure, especially in our culture, it might be just kind of the expected, automatic, rote thing that you do. Oh, bless you. Okay, But is it more important to bless this person who sneezed or to bless every single person you meet? So I love that usefulness of it. And this translates into that famous Chinese saying about the transmission of the Dharma, in that it is in the form of a finger pointing to the moon being the truth. Each teacher is pointing to the moon or to truth. However, be careful not to get caught up in the different fingers and lose sight of the moon itself. So we confuse the finger pointing at the moon for the moon itself. Jack Kornfield goes on to say, meditation techniques are mental disciplines that allow us to calm, to focus, and examine the mind, to cultivate a relationship and an understanding of the nature of this mind. The deconditioning process is a slowing down and an observation of the usual mad monkey stream of thoughts, perceptions, reactions, feelings. Usually we are dragged around by our stories of who did what to whom, or even, who did something to me, villains and victims, prejudices, memories, automatic associations. Meditation is practicing being clear, alert, freeing ourselves from conditioned reactions to the constant unfolding of events and mental processes. And some of you are familiar with Wu Wei Wu, who is a comedian and author and writer. And Wu Wei Wu says, why are you unhappy? Well, it's because 99.9% of everything you do is for yourself, and there isn't one. So there you go. So with a commitment to regular meditation practice, our mindfulness practice as we go throughout our day, time with Sangha, retreat, time with our studies, the meditator begins to see all events of the mind and body as an empty process that happens by itself. It is causes and conditions unfolding. Thinking is the result of cells doing work. One of the first things we learn in meditation is that I'm not the thinker of thoughts because I can't stop them. They come unbidden. This is a valuable and powerful lesson. It's elusive because I can add a thought. If I want to add a thought of a mocha frappuccino, oh, look at that, I can do it. But it's kind of like a bicycle going down a hill with no brakes. I can pedal, I can add to it, but I don't have control. I can't stop it. So we're not the thinker of thoughts. So to see this clearly, to experience deeply the true emptiness of self is an enormously freeing experience. The mind becomes detached, clear, radiant. The difference between pain and suffering becomes evident. Our teacher becomes everyone we meet. Mind states are felt before we react, and the feeling nature of thoughts are sensed before we speak. There even comes a point when we no longer have to do the practice. It does us. Like the piano player that must learn scales and rules only to learn to break them later, we transition from practice as form and doing to a way of life. Again, there's that cusp, right? For many of us, especially those that are new to the practice, there's so much efforting, and meditation is a doing. And for those of us that have been practicing for many, many years, and the practice is just happening. However, we still sometimes need to be reminded. So how then may we deepen our practice? This is not an unskillful desire at all. The universe wants us to wake up and provides us with a very effective mechanism called suffering. Everyone's favorite topic. But we misinterpret the accompanying emotions, and furthermore, we confuse knowledge and wisdom. Knowledge is infinite. Modern science fills libraries each and every day with all of its new discoveries, and spiritual knowledge is equally vast. One can know past lives or the existence of other planes of being or higher levels of consciousness, spiritual healing techniques, and endless other spiritual topics. However, knowledge is not wisdom. And Buddhism is a wisdom path. It is a path of purification. Wisdom is simply being in harmony with the here and the now. Nothing to gain, nothing to lose. Mindful of the flow, the wise person is not deluded. Their life is in perfect harmony with the Four Noble Truths. The happiness that comes from wisdom is beyond all knowledge and power. It is the happiness of true inner peace, a happiness that does not waver with the constant flux and change. There they are, two sides of the Venn diagram, and right there in the middle are we, as practitioners, not caught up in the good, the bad, the right, the wrong, the better, all these types of extremes. But it's like in Buddhism, we've often talked about the Buddhist Macarena, right? Clinging, grasping, aversion, pushing away, and the open hand. So there's our Macarena. And so that middle path is kind of the beauty of the Venn diagram for today's talk. So that happiness that Jesus called the peace that passeth all understanding, in our practice, not being caught up in this roller coaster of constant flux and change and just phenomena that rises and falls, but being in the world and not of it, sits the practitioner. We could say that wisdom is developed from concentration and insight in meditation. And equally, we can say that wisdom is the natural state of the resting mind-body organism. When we have let go of our habits, desires, distractions, those things that blind us, wisdom automatically arises. And I'd like to close by sharing this passage with you that comes from the third Zen patriarch, Song Sunim. And this is just the opening line. There's about 4 more pages, but you can look it up if you're interested in. It's called the Faith Mind Verses. And it begins like this. The great way is not difficult for those who have no preferences. When love and hate are absent, everything is clear and undisguised. But make the slightest distinction, and heaven and hell are set infinitely apart. If you wish to see the truth, then hold no opinions for or against anything. To set up what you like against what you dislike is the disease of the mind. When the deep meaning of things is not understood, the mind's essential peace is disturbed to no avail. So in this little diagram up here, between known and unknown, conditioned, unconditioned, between hurting and healing, we will find ourselves always there and never alone. Thank you.